Hi everyone, it's Erin from the Provincial Farmhouse. In today's video, we're doing some Halloween inspired books. For today's projects, I'm going to be using thrifted books that I got for a few dollars each, and they are all hardcover. I find these to be the best to work with. My first step is to give each book 2 coats of Dixie Belle's Coffee Bean Chalk Mineral Paint. This is a beautiful black that has a hint of brown. It is definitely one of my favorite blacks to use, and it has great coverage. My second coat is going to be very light. For the edges, I'm going to take a small artist's brush to do my painting here. I don't want to get too much paint on the inside of the cover, but I definitely need to do this because you can see the coloured part when the book is still closed. You can find a full product list in the description below and all these products on our website, theprovincialfarmhouse.com.au. Next, I'm going to seal each of these books with Dixie Belle's Flat Clear Coat. I like to seal my paint before I do any stamping because I'm able to come in with a wet wipe and fix any small errors. For my first book design, I'm going to be using this beautiful floral urn from the Reverie stamp by Iron Orchid Designs. So I'm going to peel that design off and I'm going to put it on a sheet of plastic that comes with your stamps. You can also use a thin mount for this. And then I'm going to be using some ink. Now this is a gold ink that I picked up from a shop here in Australia called Officeworks. I will link it below for my Australian watchers. Otherwise, I know Amazon does sell a few different gold inks. I'm then going to position my stamp where I want it on my book and then carefully press down. Remember to always have one hand holding that stamp in place and then lift straight up. This is not IOD ink, so I'm not going to get the same definition, but I wanted to do something different, so I'm loving the gold ink for this craft. I'm then grabbing another couple of elements from the Reverie stamp and positioning it down below. You can see these mirror each other. They are a beautiful design, and you can see that I position them on the book first before pressing my plastic down so that I have them in the right spot. I'll then ink them up just like before, and if I get any of the gold ink where I don't want it, I have a wet wipe there to wipe off any excess, and then again positioning it where I want it to go and pressing down. I'm then going to be using one of IOD's older stamp designs. This is from the Knob Toppers stamp, and I've just selected one of the designs from there. It's a lovely round ornate design, and I felt like it would look really nice between the 2 scroll designs that we already have. So I'm going to carefully position that down the bottom and press down. I then decided that I would repeat the same elements up the top but just turn them around so that the scrolls were facing down. So repeating the same steps as before, positioning them and carefully pressing down. I'm then using one of the elements from the Reverie stamp. This is one of the border designs that's in that pack, and I'm going to go around the edges and carefully press down. I don't mind if this isn't perfect. I'm really envisioning here that this book has old gold embossing that's weathered and aged over time, so we don't need it to be perfect. I'm then going to use the Knob Topper stamp again. I grabbed this design that had some lettering on it. I wanted the name because I thought it would work well as an author's name, but you can see I've inked it up and now I'm using a wet wipe to wipe back the parts of the stamp that I don't want to use, and then I'm going to position it where I want it to go and then press down. I'm going to add that same round element from the front of the books as well on the spine. I feel like that will tie the project together nicely. I'm also using that same border stamp from the Reverie stamp design, and I'm just going to do a little bit of stamping on the spine. Unfortunately, the IOD letter stamps were a little bit too big for this project, so I just have this stamp set here from Amazon. I will try and link it below if I can find it. And I'm just going to have a little bit of fun here, and we're going to spell out the words poisonous plants. Remember, these are Halloween inspired. We want them to be a little bit spooky, and I'm not going to get this lettering perfect here. It's a bit tricky to line these up perfectly. The stamps are not perfect, but I'm just going to go with it and embrace it. If you're going to try this project at home, obviously you could put some other sort of lettering on the spine of the book. I went with poisonous plants here because I felt like it tied in with the plants in the urn that we have on the center on the front of the book. For the back of the book, I'm going to use another element from the Reverie stamp. I'm going to ink up part of a stamp design, and I'm going to stamp one on one side and repeat the same process and have it on the other side, like they're mirroring each other. For our second book, I'm going to take that same stamp that we just used on the back of the first book. You can see I'm inking up half of the design here, and then I'm going to put it up the top of the book and then carefully press down. So remember, you don't have to use the stamps as is. You can pick bits and pieces of the stamp that you want to use, and it really does transform the look that they create. So just keep that in mind when you're doing your craft projects. So I've added that design to the top, and I'm adding it to the bottom of the book as well. I'm then going to be using IOD's letterpress stamp, and I'm going to be spelling out the words Book of Spells. Again, we're having a little bit of fun here for Halloween, and you can see I lined up the letters where I wanted them to go, and I'm using a thin mount to do my stamping here. So I'm repeating the same process each time, positioning the letters where I want them to go, using a thin mount with the lines to guide me, and then inking them up and carefully pressing down. Obviously, wherever I have missing letters, I need to keep that in mind and leave a space. If you don't have the same stamps that I'm using today for my lettering, you could definitely use a different brand of stamps. You saw me use some Amazon stamps before. I felt like this scale of these were very good for a book cover, or you could use some stencils alternatively as well. For the spine of the book, I've grabbed an element from the Queen Bee stamp. I'm inking it up, and then I am wiping off any excess ink that I don't want. I'm going to turn the book on its side and carefully press down. I do miss a spot here, so I've gone back in and I'm just fixing that up the best I can. I'm then going to use another part of that same stamp, this beautiful scroll sort of a design, and I'm going to press that on the spine as well. I did get a bit of smudging here. This ink is not the same as IOD, it's not the same quality, so you can't really wipe it back as freely, but that's okay. We're going to embrace the imperfections. I am then going to come along with that same stamp from the Reverie stamp design, the border stamp, and I'm just inking that up and adding that design here and there. I'm going to add that same stamp design that we did on the front to the back cover as well. And here's a look at the finished product. These turned out really well, and it was so fun to use the IOD stamps with that gold ink. Let me know which of these was your favorite. For our second project, I'm also painting the cover with Dixie Belle's Coffee Bean Chalk Mineral Paint as our base. I'm then going to be adding some IOD molds. I'm starting off with the frames mold, and I'm using some cornstarch in my molds, and then I'm adding some Jovi air dry clay, and you can see I just use my thumbs to press the clay out towards the micro rim. I'm then using an element from the Cameos mold and placing that in the center, and then I'm going to cast two of these corner pieces from the new Dainty Flourishes mold. Now this was an involved process, so so I have sped up the video here for you guys. I'm then going to grab that smaller piece from the top of the Swags mold and also the lovely bow swag from the Swags mold as well, and we're going to position that just underneath the frame that I cast earlier. And then I'm also going to cast a couple of the sweet little birds from the Cameos mold as well. I'm then going to be casting a label from the Labels 2 mold. Again, this is an older design that I'm working with today, and I'm going to work my clay into the design and then carefully flex the mold to release. This one doesn't have a micro rim because it's an older one, so it was a little bit trickier. And then I'm going to use a strong wood glue to secure all of my pieces down. Remember, I will have a list of all the molds that I have used in these projects if I'm going a little bit too fast for you here. It's just this is a very long process, and this video would be super long if I let it go in real time. So I've got all of my molds glued to the front, and now I'm going to add that label mold to the spine. And then I'm going to come in with Dixie Belle's Coffee Bean Chalk Mineral Paint and carefully paint over the top of my castings. They've only been sitting for a couple of hours. They are still wet and fragile, so I am being very careful here. I do this because I find I get less cracking and less shrinking when I paint it. It slows down the drying process, which again helps with limiting the cracking and the shrinking. The next day, I am coming in with Dixie Belle's Drop Cloth Chalk Mineral Paint, and I'm going to paint over the top of my castings. Now, I want that black peeking through, but I do also want to be able to highlight the details of our castings with that white. So you'll see that I will go over the top of some of the castings with my brush, but I often do it when I have little paint on there. I don't want to overload it. So I'm going to work my way around and paint the castings with that drop cloth. To create a little bit more texture, I did speed up the drying process with a hairdryer. I then decided that I wanted to bring out those little birds again. I felt like they faded a little bit into the background, so I'm just using a small artist brush and some more of that coffee bean chalk mineral paint, and I'm going to go over the top of the birds. I also went in and tidied up the area on the center of the cameo design. Once the back was painted and the entire book dry, I used some of Dixie Belle's Au Naturel Voodoo Gel Stain and went over the top of my drop cloth paint. Now, I do not have a clear coat down here. Usually I do, but I want this to soak in unevenly. I want this to look old and worn. If you put a clear coat down, it's a lot more of an even coverage, if that makes sense. I want this to look very imperfect, very old and weathered. So I'm going to repeat the same process. I am working in small sections here though, so I do still have some control over the depth that this creates. If you don't have access to this product that I'm using, you could use some sort of an antiquing glaze to age up your project, or a wax, or you could create a paint wash with a similar looking color. To age the book pages a little bit further and hide some of my painting mistakes, I'm going to put some of that Voodoo gel stain on the book pages as well. Once that coat was dry, I grabbed some of Dixie Belle's Grunge Glaze and I went over the top of the book here. So this is going to add more of an antiqued look. Again, we're just building up those layers. And if this look was a little bit too subtle for you, you could come in with a wax. That would definitely be a more dramatic change in tone. To add to the aged effect, I grabbed IOD's Vintage Textures stamp, specifically the crackle stamp, and I'm just using some of IOD's permanent black ink, and I'm just going to go around and randomly press down on the stamp to get that crackle look. If you don't have this stamp, you could definitely try using some sort of a crackle medium instead. And you can see here I'm just using a baby wipe to wipe back some of the excess ink. This will fade that design a little bit more and make it look a little bit more realistic. I'm going to be repeating the same process on the spine of the book and the back. I wanted to add a touch of gold on this project too, so here I'm using some of Dixie Belle's gold gilding wax. I'm just getting a little bit on my finger and then I'm just going around and hitting the top parts of our castings. Finally, I decided that I would grab those Amazon stamps again and spell out the word enchantments. I did end up running out of room, so it does only say enchantment, but that's okay, you get the gist. So again, I'm just using some gold ink for my lettering here. And here's our finished enchantment book. I love how this turned out. Those IOD molds are so beautiful to work with, and I feel like this is definitely a lovely gothic piece that you could fit into your Halloween decor. Let me know what you think of this project in the comments. For our final book, you can see that I have grabbed the Labels 2 mold again, and I'm going to be casting 2 of this particular design here because I want to add them to the spine of the book. I know a lot of those older books had those sort of old hinges or those old straps on them, so that's what we're trying to replicate here. I've already painted my book in that coffee bean, and so I'm going to cast 2 of these, and then I'm also going to cast an additional mold from the Labels 1 mold, and this is going to be for the spine of the book. I'm then going to dust my plastic sheet with some cornstarch and add some of that cornstarch to my rolling pin, and I'm going to be rolling out some air dry clay. I'm getting it to about 1 to 2 mils thick, and then I'm going to position it on my book and work out how much of this I want to use. You can see I am just tearing off any excess clay that I don't want, and then I'm going to apply my wood glue to the book. I don't mind if I'm a bit messy here, I can always wipe that off soon. And I'm going to carefully press down. I'm then going to add those label molds that we created before. I'm adding a strong wood glue to those, and you can see I'm just going to carefully bend those around the book. You can definitely bend and manipulate your castings like this while they're still wet. It's best to do that while they're wet, otherwise they'll just crack if you try and do them after they've dried. You could try this technique with resin if you like, but then you would probably have to tape your molds in place while they're drying. I'm then going to prop my book up on a paint container so that I don't damage the underside of the molds, and you can see I'm just using a wet wipe to tidy up any excess glue. Just down here in the bottom left hand corner, I decided that I didn't want that mold overlapping with the clay, so I'm just tearing off some of the clay, and in tearing it off I'm still going to get that jagged rustic edge that I'm going for. And then I'm going to add some glue to the mold that we made for the spine of the book. I'm then going to cast 2 of these corner pieces from the Dainty Flourishes mold. In the center part of this book in our wet clay, I'm going to be using the Reverie stamp again, and I'm just positioning our angel lady in the center there, and then I'm pressing down. I'm not going to get a perfect impression here, and that's okay. I want it to look like a sort of ghostly spirit image, and I really feel like that was achieved here. And then I'm going to come in and just tear a little bit more clay away. I just wanted to add to that jagged edge, and then I'm going to glue down the corner pieces that we made earlier. Once I've done that, I'm going to paint over the top of my clay and my castings carefully with some of that coffee bean color. These are still wet, but remember, I like to do this to minimize the cracking and the shrinking. And once I have the entire book painted, I'll let it dry overnight. The next day, I came in with some of Dixie Belle's Burlap Chalk Mineral Paint, and just like on our previous book, I'm going to paint over the top of the black, but I still want some of that black peeking through. And I'm just going to run my brush lightly over some of the casting details so that we are highlighting those beautiful details. And I'm going to repeat the same process on the spine and the back of the book. Again, I'm just being gentle because I do have some castings on the underside of my book as well. Once my paint was completely dry, I used some of Dixie Belle's Best Dang Wax in Clear, and I'm going to cover the entire outside of the book with that wax. It's going to seal in our paint, but it's also going to be a great base for the dark wax that we're going to be using next. I'm then going to be using a small brush with some brown Best Dang wax on it to work that wax into the details, and then I'm using a microfiber cloth to buff back the excess, and you can see that that brown wax sits down nicely in all of those details. I'm also going to bring attention to the cracked and torn edges of the clay and the details of our castings. So I'm just going to repeat the same process of adding that lovely brown wax and then wiping back the excess in areas. And this is something that you can have a play with and experiment with how heavy you want your wax to be, or if you need to pull it back, you can use a little bit more clear wax, almost like an eraser. I'm using wax for this step, but you could use a glaze instead or a paint wash. To add to the center image and make it look a little bit more ghostly or spirit-like, I did come in with some of Dixie Belle's white Best Dang wax, and I just highlighted some of the details, and then I will buff back the excess. This is just a very subtle look. I'm then going to use those same Amazon stamps, but this time I'm using them with IOD's permanent black ink, and I'm going to spell out the word curses. Finally, I'm going to add some of Dixie Belle's gold gilding wax to some of the details. I also decided to add some of that Au Naturel Voodoo Gel stain to the pages of my books. I am a bit of a messy crafter, and this helped to hide those paint marks. And here's our Curses book. I'm really happy with how this turned out. Let me know what you think of this project in the comments. I really hope that you've enjoyed today's video and that it's given you some ideas on how you can take thrifted books and turn them into beautiful, fun Halloween decor. Let me know if you had a favorite book from today. If you enjoyed today's video, I would really appreciate it if you would hit that like button, comment, and share it out to a friend that you think might enjoy it. If you haven't already, I would love it if you would hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so that you don't miss out on any of our videos. You can find the products used today on our website, theprovincialfarmhouse.com.au. Thanks for watching.